Okay, today I'm looking at De Natura Sonoris number 2 by Krzysztof Penderecki. Penderecki? I'm going to say Penderecki. And the dimensions of the score are a bit all over the place. But yeah, if you've heard like Threnody to the Victims of Hiroshima, De Natura Sonoris 1 and 2 are kind of like that, except with a full orchestra, not just a string orchestra. And this is like the 70s stuff that Penderecki was most famous for. The instrumentation for this one is missing winds, I think, so it's actually a bit different from a typical orchestra. It's 0000 4041, and then percussion, piano. Oh, it's a harmonium, so it's a bit different. Similar sound to an accordion. But there's going to be a lot of divisi, as you can imagine, in the strings here. 24 violins, so 12 first, 12 seconds, 8 violas, 8 cellos, 6 basses. And it doesn't really say how many percussionists, but you need 4 cymbals, 2 tam-tams, 2 gongs, metal block, I guess, like a brake drum, crotales, flexitone, regular bells, tubular bells, bass drum, timpani, a couple things that I need to translate. So this would be a slab, according to Google Translate, so maybe like a slab of wood. And then this is an iron bar, or an anvil probably. And then this one is a saw, so like a musical saw. You can tell I'm not a conductor because I don't really know my Italian instruments. And yeah, it's a more adventurous looking score than most of the stuff we've covered in the series. It's like graphic almost. You know, these measures are timed out in seconds, and you have sort of like sound mass type things going on. And then like obviously the big blocks are like clusters. You can see how this type of notation kind of like a lot of spectral composers like Grisey took this notation and then added bar lines, kind of. But it's really cumbersome for the performers because you have to basically give them each a little score to read off of, or some sort of reduced score. So the parts are really cumbersome. Yeah, so quasi senza misura for this symbol, the tilde. Highest tone possible, lowest tone possible. Very fast tremolo. I'm assuming instead of the 3 lines, this would intersect the stem of the note. Repetition of the whole group. So, you know, instead of repeat bar lines or whatever, he opts for like these dotted dash/dotted lines. And then a quicker repetition would just be dotted lines. Overpressure distortion is indicated with this like line of accents. Slow vibrato, molto vibrato, irregular glissandi. So a lot of horizontal line sort of things, right? The eye of the performer is sort of directed across the page that way. He asked for the wind or the brass, I'm assuming, to overblow, and then breath sounds from the brass. Any 2 notes played together, so that's a little bit aleatoric. And quarter tone sharp, I guess, 3/4 tone sharp, quarter tone flat, 3/4 tone flat, and this would be playing on the other side of the bridge. I guess flageolet is this symbol. Then he has percussion symbols to indicate like the implements that you're playing with, which is like, you see it sometimes in scores. It's becoming a little bit old-fashioned, I think. Yeah, you can see. So this is the kind of thing that is important to this notation. So say you have these string players and they have a cluster. He notates the cluster in brackets, and it's the responsibility of the violins 2 through 8 to make the cluster, right? They each have to pick a note, and it's like all divisi, and then they have to sort of like, the one that's in the middle stays there, and the ones that are further away have to gliss towards the middle, right? So definitely not what players are used to dealing with, but creates very effective sounds. So yeah, this type of thing by Penderecki is like, it's has to be on your listening list kind of thing. Like I think every composer, this has to be part of their education, right? You got to know this stuff was going on in the 70s, and this is a good alternative to Threnody because it's short, it's got greater variety of instruments, and it was maybe not as cliche. Died in 2020, born in 1933. He has a lot of like famous sacred works from after this more experimental period. He's went totally in the opposite direction with his career and started doing more tonal stuff. I can't remember if it's like sacred minimalism or if it's just sort of like normal tonal stuff. Like Threnody, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, it's been used a lot in pop culture. I think most famously it's used in Children of Men during the start of that super long single shot like war scene, which I kind of want to watch just talking about it. And he's one of those composers who was born before the Second World War, so he sort of was well into his career and was a young composer like just as the Second World War was ending. So he could really take advantage of the Europe's like avant-garde music scene in the 70s. He was in a good position to do that. His early works influenced by Webern and Pierre Boulez. And then I guess his international recognition began in 1959, interestingly. So yeah, definitely post-war kind of stuff. At least according to this wiki, De Natura Sonoris number 2 marks sort of the end of his avant-garde period, which is interesting. But yeah, he's a big guy, right? He's like a celebrity, basically. Yeah, I think, like, we looked at some Górecki last week, or maybe the week before, and I think Górecki is maybe a more famous Polish composer, but Penderecki's up there. He is very famous. This was the first work that I heard of his, and I think it was a good introduction. So, yeah, let's get into it, and I'll let you know my thoughts if you care to stick around. The link to this recording is in the video description. Okay, yeah, so obviously it's a very cool piece, and it's a fun listen, especially with the score. If you can get your hands on a physical score too, it's really nice to see how it's all laid out for the conductor, who is mostly just cueing things. The brass stuff is so fun. I just love the brass in this. If you look at some of these chords that are fortissimo, you got like super low trombone, like bass trombone on the low B flat, and then on the E, on the B, like more than an octave above that, and then on the high F sharp, and the tuba's on a high F sharp amidst all this, and the horns are spread super far too. I like the use of repeated note stuff, and how that sort of transitions into the percussion uh, tremolos and like the saw sound and stuff. It's all a very carefully set up climax. It's a really big moment, and the first 3 minutes, like the sustained stuff, is really cool too. Um, if you recognize this piece, it was used in The Shining, I believe. I forgot to mention that in the intro. So it is a big one. It is pretty, like, a lot of people have heard it. Yeah, I'm not sure what the Wikipedia article was on about this being more romantic sounding and like less avant-garde. I mean, there are chords in this that are less clustery, but it is still very challenging work in a lot of ways, and that's why people always associate it with like horror movies, is because it's very hard to wrap your head around it. But I think it's important to recognize that these pieces to Penderecki were just sort of like abstract experiments, and that's sort of how they should be listened to. You don't really have to infer other. You don't have to impose other like cultural readings on top of it. You can just enjoy it as a noise piece. Noise music is fun. It's like positive and celebratory, and this is no different. This is what people sound like when they express themselves. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about this one. In a couple days, we'll be looking at the first one, and maybe we can do a little bit of compare and contrast. Um, and yeah, hopefully you liked the bass drop in this with the entry of the four trombones. It's it's not as good as the Liggity Atmospheres bass drop, but I do think it's got to be in your top five bass drops of classical music kind of thing. So, yeah, until next time, happy listening.